What goes on, everybody? My name is Carboni431, and welcome to the first episode of a new series in which I will explain all, or at least most of, the things that the Super Smash Bros. Melee debug menu has to offer. I get a lot of questions about all of the different functions of this thing, how to set certain things up, and so I figured I would take my the knowledge that I've kind of amassed over almost 9 years of using this thing, and just put it all into a video series that's easy to access and hopefully educational and interesting. And yeah, I guess I would just like to put it all together for the sake of archival purposes, so in case anybody wants to know about some hidden content in a 17-year-old game, they'll be able to get all of the details here. So yeah, that's kind of the plan here. And without further delay, I guess we should just jump right into the first and possibly the most important aspect of this mode, that being versus mode. And so, as you can see, there's not a whole lot here. Well, that's because they're buried under folders, all of the options, that is. And so, yeah, both of these options are pretty relevant to success here, so I'm going to cover both of them in one video. Also, the rule menu is pretty small, so really it doesn't deserve its own video. Take that, rule. Anyway, so first of all, we're going to talk about the Dairanto menu. And Dairanto is Japanese for Great Fray, I think. Anyway, within this menu, we have a lot of options that can cause a lot of really bizarre things to happen. And, well, that's the appeal of the debug menu after all, so I guess that's good. First of all, we have char select, which is, of course, short for character select. And so here we have listings for players 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we also have this listing for all char, and that's relevant later on when we get into 6-player battles, but right now it's just completely unimportant. So just ignore that. Just leave it set to Mario or Luigi or whoever. But yeah, there's not really a whole lot here. It's just you scroll through this list of names and pick a character that you want to play as. Whether that's a character who's actually playable in the game, or perhaps someone who is inaccessible normally, like Master Hand, the Wireframes, Giga Bowser, or Crazy Hand. And you'll notice that some of these names are kind of weird. Like, for example, Roy is called Emblem, and that's just because the internal names don't quite match up with what the character's actual names are. But even with something like this, it's pretty obvious as to who each character is. But yeah, with just a little bit of practice, you pick up on who is who really quickly. But yeah, so while that is quite possibly the more like notable one, the biggest appeal, all of these other options are also capable of providing you with something that's like really funny or really weird or really glitchy. Probably really glitchy, because that happens a lot. The second option here is scale select, and this allows you to change each player's size. So kind of like if you want to make somebody the size of like a super mushroom, you'd go up to like 1.5, or if you want to make it look like they used a poison mushroom, then you go down to maybe 0.5. And really those are about as far as the reasonable size ranges go. But if you're feeling really crazy, you can go all the way up to size 5.0 on the large end, or size 0.10 on the small end. And again, things get weird when you start using characters at those kinds of scales, but again, this is all supposed to be fun, so I guess who am I to complain? Also, one other thing to note is that if you scroll down from 1.0, you're only allowed to go down to 0.20. And I don't know why this is, but all you really need to do is just scroll all the way up to 5.0, and then scroll all the way back down to 0.10. Also, something else I just remembered is that if you hold R while scrolling through an option in the debug menu, your selection will happen a lot faster. So like, this is normal speed, but then if I hold R and I press left or right, it goes this fast, and that's just a huge time-saving measure. I'm really glad they added that. They had the foresight to make their developers feel less, or I guess make this process feel less tedious. So yeah, that's the scale select. Next is the kind select, and this basically just allows you to assign the player type for each controller slot. Again, all p-kind is the same as all char. It's completely irrelevant right now, just ignore that. But yeah, you have 4 options for player types. You have human, which is, of course, a human-controlled player controlled with a GameCube controller, or if you're on an emulator, maybe a 360 controller, or really any gamepad that you want to use. CPU is, of course, the AI-controlled opponents. Demo is also a computer-controlled opponent, but it can also be controlled with a controller. This type of character pops up in training mode, where you can set one of the AI's logic patterns, I guess, or one of its types to be control, I think, or something like that. Basically, it makes it so that somebody in the second controller slot can control the enemy computer player in training mode. And you can do that here. No real reason for it, but you can. And finally, none just removes that player from the game. So if you want a 2-player match, just do this. Just have GM none on 3 and 4. Or if you want to have a 4-player free-for-all, just do something like that. It's that easy. Next is the color select, and oh boy, this one gets a little bit weird, so be ready for a long, arduous explanation. So, this is pretty obvious as to what it does. It allows you to change the palette swaps of each character. 0 is the default. They're using programmer logic where 0 corresponds to the first thing in a series, 1 corresponds to the second, 2 the third, and so on and so forth. And so, basically, if you want the default palette swap, always just stick with 0 like they have here. Now, note that you're able to go all the way up to, like, palette swap 9, or I guess palette swap 10. Even though I think the max amount of palette swaps in Melee is 6? I could be wrong on that. Yoshi might have 7, but I can't quite remember. But do note that you can exceed the amount of palette swaps on a certain character, and that causes some really weird things to happen. So if we use Fox as an example, then he only has 4 palette swaps. There's white, red, blue, and green. So if we go one higher and we pick 4, which is actually costume 5, the game doesn't really know what to do with that because it doesn't have a 5th costume. So in situations like this, what will happen is that the character will be set to their default palette swap, but their stock icon is going to act a little weird. In this particular situation, it sets Fox's stock icon to Donkey Kong's green stock icon. And I think that's because, basically, the game panics trying to find a stock icon for him, and so it goes back to an earlier character in the character list and pulls an icon from the corresponding costume slot. So DK comes before Fox, and DK actually has a 5th palette swap. So the game just takes the stock icon from that and gives it to Fox. Note that if you go really far out of range and you give somebody like costume 10, there's nobody that the game could pull a stock icon from, and I really need to stop saying stock icon. But there's nobody that the game can pull something like that from, so what happens is your character just doesn't have a stock icon. Last time. So basically, if you want that gone, you're free to do so, I guess. Next up is subcolor, and this is a bit more fun than regular palette swaps. Basically, these are filters that are applied to a character model, and they can go on top of palette swaps. So, I guess just a quick rundown. 0 is the default, just your character looks normal. 1 is the light filter that is used in team battles where you have 2 of a character on a certain team, and then similarly, in team battles with 3 people on the same team, player 3 would have a darker tint. And yeah, you can't select these manually unless you're in a team battle, so it's fun to have the option here. Option 3 is a completely black filter, and you've probably seen this before in the event match Link's Adventure, I think it is, where Link has to face off against Shadow Link. One final option that isn't really talked about very much is option 4, which is, I guess you could say, is subcolor 5, but it's a completely gray filter. And I've read that this is the same gray that's used in Mr. Game & Watch's character outline, but I can't really be sure if that's the case or not, so take that with a grain of salt. Alright, next up is the damage set option, and this just allows you to apply certain amounts of damage that will be added to a character every time they respawn. So, start of the match, player 1 would have 20 damage. Player 1 gets KO'd, they respawn, they have 20 damage. So if you want to just bully somebody and give them like 999% damage, I'm not going up all the way, that'd be ridiculous and annoying. If you want to give somebody 999, you can, and you can just have fun smacking people around. Offense ratio and defense ratio basically impact either characters' abilities to KO opponents or characters' resistances to being KO'd. Offense ratio basically influences how much knockback a character can do, and this ranges from 0.10 all the way up to 3.0. A higher value means that a character can KO another character at a lower percentage, and a low value means that a character will have trouble KOing an opponent even when that opponent is at a really high damage percentage. And defense ratio is basically like an inversion of that, where characters with a lower defense ratio are more difficult to knock out, while characters with a higher defense ratio are a lot easier to knock out. So if you have a defense ratio of like 3.0, you're going to get knocked out immediately, even if you have 0% damage. Next up is CPU typeset, and this section gives you a lot of options as to how the computer-controlled players behave. So for example, you can make them jump around, you can make them walk, you can make them stand in place. Some of these behaviors are available in training mode. You can apply them to that demo character. But others are really weird. Like, for example, SPLW Link is the Link that appears in the event match where he and Samus are just constantly using their down specials and just throwing bombs everywhere. And so you have access to that here. This section is really big on its own, so I'm not going to detail how all of the AI behaviors work right now. That's going to be in a separate video. But for now, just know that this section allows you to modify the AI of different characters. Or of, I guess, all of the player slots if they are computer controlled. Next up is CPU level set, which is just basically setting the computer's difficulty level, or their reaction time, or however the game handles that. This number ranges from 0 to 9. Note that that's actually 10 values, so I'm not entirely sure if this 9 is actually like level 10, and it's like a super hard opponent that is even harder than level 9, or if level 0 is actually level 0 and is actually worse than a level 1. I'm not sure how the numbering works here, and it's a little hard to test because really, at this level of like AI stupidity, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between level 0 and level 1. Similarly, if the AI is acting like a god, you won't be able to tell the difference between like a level 9 or a theoretical level 10, if that's what that is. Next up is Team Select, which is also rather obvious as to what it's supposed to do. Basically, for team battles, it allows you to set each player's team. One fun thing is that this doesn't change the character's color to match the team color, so you're not restricted by that, which is really kind of annoying in like the regular game. Also, one really weird thing is that green team is actually blue team, and this listing for blue team corresponds to green team. I don't know how they screwed that up or why they did that, but that's just how it is, so if you really care, be wary of that, I guess. Alright, getting near the end. The stage listing, again, rather obvious. It gives you a lot of options as to which stages you want to play on. Some are completely inaccessible in the main game, such as Dummy. Some are regular stages, like Great Bay, and some are single-player stages that you normally can't fight on, like the target test stages or the adventure mode stages. And again, this is a huge topic. All of the different, like, weird idiosyncrasies of each stage are really numerous, so again, this is going to be covered in a separate video. next up is melee kind, which basically just allows you to swap between free-for-all or battle royal and team battle. And so, yeah, it's a binary choice. Just make up your mind, I guess. And then finally we have dash 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 exit, which just starts the battle. It's basically your press start to play option here. You can also just hit the start button like in any other melee and it'll start it whether you have this option highlighted or not. Now before we can actually start a battle though, we need to go to the rules section and actually set up some rules for this match. And honestly, it's a bit more limited than the rule select in the actual game. Like, we have options here. We can select the game mode. We have time, which is, again, like normal, it's the just the countdown clock. We have stock, which is the mode that everybody likes, just how you have a set number of lives. You have coin mode, which is a really fun party mode. And then you have endless mode, which basically just ignores all of your time and stock settings and just puts you into an infinite battle. What's really weird is that bonus mode just isn't an option here. There's just no way to get to it. I don't think really anybody played bonus mode anyway, but it just feels so weird to have endless mode here and not have bonus mode. So anyway, we have some options here. Time min lets you choose how many minutes are in a match. Time sec allows you to choose how many seconds. And this is fun because you can't do that in the normal game. So if you want to remake that one event match, I think it's called Seconds Anyone. If you want to remake that, give yourself 7 seconds to fight, by all means, do so. And of course, stock is just how many lives you have in a given match. I forgot to test what this is. This is -1. I'm not sure what a negative stock is, but I will put the actual explanation, the actual functionality on screen right now. Do it. So, yeah. Again, like, aside from that -1, it's pretty straightforward, just 1 stock to 99. If you give if you give all players 0 stocks, then the match is just going to end immediately, and that's just not fun. Damage ratio is kind of a fusion of offense ratio and defense ratio, except it's universal. It affects all of the players in a match. So lower values here make people harder to kill in general. People do less knockback and they have more resistance. And higher numbers like 3.0 make people easier to kill. So they'll take more knockback and you also deal more knockback out. Vibration select is completely useless. All you can do is change whether or not your controller will vibrate. Who cares? Why is it here? And item switch allows you to change the frequency of the appearances of items. So you can go from very high to nothing, or very low, or middle, which is medium. But that's really your only option for items here. You can't, like, select this to press, or to, like, turn items on or off. Actually, if I hit start, will that start the battle, or will it do nothing? Nothing. Cool. I learned something new. But yeah, this menu is kind of limited just because it doesn't give you the choices that you would have in, like, the actual rule select. But I mean, when you have all of these options, I guess that doesn't really matter too terribly much. But yeah, I guess that's actually pretty much it for the versus mode menu. These two menus are very powerful when combined together, even if this one is a little bit limited. But again, this is just so much fun to play around with that you can make so many chaotic battles anyway. So yeah, that explanation is all over with. I hope that was interesting. Next time we're going to take a look at the char select in a bit more detail. I don't know why I just said char select. I could have just said character select, the thing that it actually is. We're going to take a look at this in a bit more detail and describe the normally inaccessible fighters like Master Hand, the wireframes, Giga Bowser, things like that. So yeah, look forward to it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you next time.